everybody, thanks for joining me here today. This is Nicole with Topaz, and today's session is Perfecting Your Portraits with Clean, Clarity, and ReStyle. This is a really exciting final session here for me this week because I do a lot of portrait work in my personal work, and Topaz Clean, Clarity, and ReStyle are staples within a lot of my portraits. The reason is Clean is absolutely fantastic when it comes to removing larger spots on faces like sunspots or larger, deeper wrinkles that you might want to just soften up a little bit while still maintaining a very natural texture. I usually use it in combination with Photoshop to mask out the majority of the clean effect that's applied and only add it back in exactly where I need it. So we're going to go over that today. And then Topaz Clarity, if I had to pick one program that I had to have at all times, it's Topaz Clarity. It does amazing things with clarity and adding clarity and beautiful contrast within imagery, but it also removes contrast, which does amazing things when you're working on the micro contrast for skin. So we're going to show how to smooth and remove some dark eye shadows today, all within Clarity, and then apply it directly to only the skin within Clarity as well. And then the last program we're going to cover today is ReStyle. And ReStyle is kind of my little secret toning arsenal. I absolutely love it. If you know a couple tricks, the way to use it with portraits, you'll use it all the time. When you first go into ReStyle, you might say, whoa, these effects are crazy. But if you learn a couple little tips and tricks, you'll see that it's a very effective program for portraits. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be covering this image here today, but not first. We'll also be looking at this image from the very beginning, going through camera raw all the way to the final. But I'd like to start with this image here, and I'll show you kind of what I've done here today just to get prepared. It's a little heavy toned for me right now, but here's where we started. This is just a nice family snapshot, something you might take on vacation, and then get home and say, you know, I really want to frame this and get it to the other family members and just clean it up a bit. Clean, Clarity, ReStyle are all you're going to need to do that. You don't even have to take it into another program. So I first want to show you just the workflow for those three programs together. Let me zoom in here just a little bit and show you the clean work that I did, which is masked out majority, but you can see some of the splotches and sunspots and wrinkles just lighten up just a bit. So here's before, here's before clean. You'll notice that there's some sunspots over on our mom here on the left-hand side of the screen, some a little bit deeper wrinkles, not bad, but just something that we softened up a touch with Topaz Clean. And then I took it into Topaz Clarity to not only smooth out the skin, but also brighten up their faces and get everybody's eyes to go directly to their faces. Lastly, I took it into ReStyle and got some fun toning to add to it. Again, it's a little bit strong, and I'd probably take that opacity down a bit to reflect exactly what I wanted. But altogether, here's before, here's after. Let's go ahead and go through this process. I'm just going to get rid of these three layers above, start with my background layer, make a copy of that layer, and go directly into Clean. Please know that everything you see that I'm doing here, you can also do within Lightroom, PaintShop Pro, any of the programs that run all of our plugins. So I just choose to use Photoshop because that's my personal host of choice, but you can apply this to any host that you're using these programs through. So Topaz Clean is the first program I'm going to get into. I'm going to come down here to the bottom right and press Reset All. Majority of the time when you open up Topaz programs, it's going to apply the last used preset that you used. So I want to start fresh and go to Reset. It'll also open up at 100%. You should stay at the 100% level. That's a tip for both Topaz Clean and Simplify. The algorithms behind both of those programs, it'll start to affect your pixels and do different things and manipulate them. But when you're looking at it at 50% or 25% and start pulling back, it's going to recalculate it and show you something that is a little bit different than you see at 100%. What you're looking at 100% zoom level is the exact same thing that's going to be applied back in your host most programs. So just know that it's best to look at Topaz Clean at 100%. Topaz Clean is a texture and edge program. It allows you to go in and manipulate both your texture and your edges together to get some really cool effects. So here's something like Stylized Edges Collection, where you can come in and get a curly smooth effect, and you'll see all these really kind of illustrative lines flattening out of the texture of the skin, and you start to see that you can get these kind of cartoon effects fairly easily. Let's look at the cartooned preset. And so this is all edge and texture work to be able to get these effects. You can come over here on the right-hand side and really manipulate that further. But for this particular demonstration, we're going to be looking at how to work with removing some larger blemishes or sunspots from the skin, maintaining realistic texture, and smoothing out wrinkles as well. So for that, I'm going to go into my skin collection, which is over here on the top left. I'm going to click on that. And my favorite skin preset to start off with is Skin Even, but you can come on any of these and look at certain levels like blemish removal. You'll notice with blemish removal, all of a sudden I've really smoothed out a ton of the skin, removed a lot of the blemishes and sunspots, and really taken out a lot of those wrinkles. But it's a little heavy-handed for me, so I'm going to continue down here to Skin Even. Skin Even is just a touch less of the effect. So here's before, here's after. I want you to keep in mind as we're working with Clean that I'm going to take this back into Photoshop and mask out the majority of the effects. So really I'm just looking at the skin. I'm not looking at the eyes or the mouth, areas where I really want to keep detail and not have it go smooth like this, but I just want to look at the skin. So you can tell that even though it removes these splotches, that you still see pores and nice texture being pulled from the skin. If anything, you see additional texture that's being pulled from the skin and added to our image. If you see a little bit too much texture, you can come down to your texture panel on the right-hand side in the adjustment panel and just take the boost down. If it's boosted up, that's going to take your small texture and lessen that kind of roughness. And you can even take the overall texture down as well. And you'll start to see that it removes some of that overbearing texture and allows for a more natural skin to come through. Now it's still a little over smoothing for me, even though it's removing these sunspots and things, it's just removing too much. So one thing that I would come and try first is come up to the strength slider and take that down to 1 and see what that looks like. Okay, so that's starting to be a really great overall skin smoothing effect. But I wanted to use it to really remove some of the sunspots and be able to go in Photoshop and add the clean effect to just those areas and remove them entirely, which I won't be able to do at this level. So I'm going to take that back up to 2, and you can see it smooths out everything. And maybe I'll take my threshold down. My threshold is going to determine which details are going to be considered when smoothing out certain areas of your image. So if you take your threshold all the way down, you'll notice that a lot of the details come back in, but as you take your threshold up, more smaller details and smaller details are going to be recognized as you wanting to affect those. And so you can really manipulate where within your skin you want that clean effect to start. So I just took that down from 0.6 to about 0.43, and I'm pretty happy there. So at this point, it doesn't have to be perfect. One thing that's really nice about Clean is it removes splotches, but it retains the undertone of the image, and you're going to be able to add it back in a very natural way. And I'm going to say OK, and get back into Photoshop. And the first thing that I'll do in Photoshop is add a mask, a black mask that's going to hide the entire clean effect that we just made. Let's go ahead and scroll in to 100% so you see it. Here's before, here's after. Way too strong in my opinion, so we're just going to add a mask. I'm going to double click on that mask and say invert, and it'll make it a black mask, which is hiding all of the effects. And now I can use a white paintbrush to reveal the effects in only the areas that I want. I'm going to start over here on Mom and grab my white paintbrush. I'm going to take the opacity down to about 75. It can be pretty strong. You could even leave it at 100%. You're not going to see the edges as long as you have a really soft brush, which we do. Our hardness is all the way at 0. So I have a very soft brush. I'll go ahead and leave it at 100% so you really see it come through. And I'm going to decrease the size of my brush using the bracket keys, and I can just click on any of the sunspots or areas that I want to remove. I find that this is a better way to remove these types of areas on the skin than using, for example, the spot healing brush within Photoshop or something like that. And the reason is because Clean allows for the actual texture that was there in the image to be retained, and you're not having to double check the area and make sure it looks good. You know going into it that it's going to look good when you click on the spots. So I'm going to take my opacity down to about 50% and go over some of the deeper wrinkles around her eyes. I don't want to get rid of them because that would take away the character lines of her face, which I don't want. But everybody wants to reduce their wrinkles at times, so I'm just going to reduce them a little bit for her, not completely though. All right, I'm going to take this back up to 100% and remove a few other little sunspots or areas that I think need to be adjusted. And it just does this in a very natural way. So let me show you this before and after. Here's before and after. Again, before and after. You can even use Clean to remove larger kind of areas that might just be caused by, for example, being cold. This was taken during a chilly moment, so if you see some areas that are just kind of red or blotchy just because of the chill in the air, or maybe somebody has a cold, you can come in and just smooth those areas away very quickly and get a very natural effect. So I've just done a couple things on her cheeks, under her nose, and in between her eyebrows, and here's before and after. It's subtle, but it makes a huge difference when working with portraits. Up next, we have Topaz Clarity, which is going to go a step further and not only work on the texture and smoothing it out, but also work on the shadows and the overall tones of the face. So I'm going to make a quick stamp layer by going Alt-Control-Shift-E, and now I've got a solid layer here to work with and take into Topaz Clarity. Topaz Clarity is a contrast program. It breaks down your image into 4 different levels of contrast. Your micro contrast, which is going to be contrast that's very small areas of difference. So things like skin or a textured wall, you can really control with that micro contrast. Low and medium contrast are going to be more mid-tone contrasts, where you can start to affect things on portraits like under eye shadows and things of that nature. And then high contrast is going to affect your whites and your blacks more than anything else. I'm going to go ahead and press reset all over here. And we could work with some of the collections and some of the presets over here. We do have a portrait or fashion collection, which would be a good place to start if you're wanting to use presets. I prefer to come over to the right-hand side and create my own preset. So let's scroll in maybe to about 50%. And the very first thing I do with a portrait is take my micro contrast down to about -0.2. And this alone is going to do wonders for skin. So here's before, here's after. Let me scroll in just a little bit more so you see. Here's before. And you see it's very fine wrinkles, some texture, a little bit of discoloration, and after, it just smooths that right up with very, very little effort. Next, I'm going to come into my low contrast and take that down just a touch more, and especially my medium contrast, which is going to do really great things for under eye shadows and shadows that are maybe on one side of the face and you just want to even it out. You can just take that to the left, and you can see it really opens those up. Now it does some other things to the face, like the eyes. It starts to affect those in a negative way, in my opinion, because you're starting to bring some fuzziness and grayness in there, and you don't necessarily want that. But don't worry about that. We're not focusing on that right now. Right now we're just focusing on the skin, brightening that up, smoothing it up, but still keeping it very natural. High contrast is really up to you which way you go. Sometimes I actually like to boost this a little bit more and get some nice contrast of tone within the face against the deeper character lines in a face. So as I take this up, you'll see that the darker shadows pop out a little bit more, which I kind of like, versus making them disappear. So now that I've done my dynamics, I can come to my tone levels. Let's scroll back out so we can see both of our subjects here. There we go. I can come into my tone levels and manipulate that a little bit further if you want to brighten up skin. Usually taking the midtones up just a touch is good. So we'll just leave it right there. Now here's before and here's after. I really like what's happening with the skin, but I dislike what's happening everywhere else on the image. Clarity has an awesome masking module if you're not aware of it. It's connected to both of the two tabs, Clarity and the Hue, Saturation, and Luminance, so you can independently add masks to either one of those. And within those masking panels, you have something called the Color Range tool, which is awesome when you're working with portraits and you want to just affect the skin. I use it all the time. The first thing that I'm going to do, because I don't like what the clarity adjustments have done to the rest of the image, I only want to keep it on the skin. I'm going to hide everything I've done and only add it back into the skin using the Color Range tool. So I'm going to invert first, and now everything that I've just done is now hidden. And now I can go to my reveal color, white, go down to my color range, open up the color range adjustment panel, and you'll see as you scroll into your image this little green dot. Just grab that green dot and put it on an area of the skin that's kind of a neutral area that is covering a large portion of tone. So once you do that, you'll see up here in the top right in your masking thumbnail here exactly what's going on. You have a black area that's hiding all the effects and the white area which is revealing it. And when you move that little color range dot around, that determines what tone is going to be used for the color range mask. You can increase the size of the radius of that. So if you increase your size, you can see that it's going to start to affect more of the image. You can also increase the sensitivity. So if you decrease the sensitivity, you're going to be affecting more tones within that range. And if you increase the sensitivity, you can get very, very specific to the tone that the green dot is on. I'm going to stay very sensitive and take the size up very high and say okay, and actually go in and add another one to my mask. This mask, when you're using the color range tool, is additive. So you can come in and use as many color range choices as you want just to keep adding to your mask and getting all the tones you want in there. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to say okay, and now I'll show you before and after. This time it's only affecting the skin. Again, here's before and after. It is affecting the hair just a little bit on the outside because those tones are very similar to their face. It's very simple because, again, this mask is additive. To come in, choose your hide brush. I'm going to leave that at a strength of 1 and go down to a normal brush. Take the brush size down and the hardness up. And now I can just go along the edges and get rid of the areas that I don't want to work with or I don't want to be in my mask. And you can see that happening over here again on the thumbnail. All right, when I'm happy there, I can move on. The saturation and luminance is also something I think everybody who has clarity and does portraits should know about. Sometimes it's you want to brighten faces, not only smooth them out, but also brighten up the skin tones, and maybe desaturate some red splotches or saturate some orange tones. Our HSL filter is great because it breaks down all of the image into 8 different colors, and then an overall slider as well. I usually only use the saturation and luminance when it comes to my portrait work, and what I find myself doing the most is going directly to the orange, because the orange slider really affects most skin tones nicely. And if you just take that to the right, you can saturate it a little bit, or to the left and desaturate it. So I'm actually going to take that just about 0.02 to the right to get a little bit more color into their faces. And then I'm going to go to my luminance. And this is the one that I use the most as far as skin tone, because you can brighten up the skin very quickly by that orange slider. And then if they have red cheeks or red nose or something like that, you can brighten up the red as well to try to match the luminance of the orange and get a nice reduction of that kind of ruddiness within a face. And now that we're here, once again, I've affected the whole image and not just their skin tone. So I want to go through the same process with the mask within the HSL filter that I did within the Clarity. So I'm going to quickly go and invert, click my reveal brush, go into my color range, move this around to where I want it to be. I'll keep that same choice, go sensitivity high, say okay, go back in, come back over here, say okay, and that quickly I was able to just get their faces and some of the hair, and it's very quick again to get rid of any areas that you might not want affected within that mask, like the outsides of their, like the hair. Let me just get rid of it really quickly here. And the scarf. And there we have it. All right, so all together, here's before and after. I'm happy. I'm going to press OK. When you're working within Photoshop, you have the advantage of the opacity slider for that particular layer. We also have opacity sliders for clarity as well. So if you get to the end of your result and you say, that's a little bit too heavy-handed for me, I want to reduce everything, but I don't want to go and work with the individual sliders because it took a lot of work to get to where you are, just lower the opacity of the overall adjustment, and you can do that within the Clarity program or right now within Photoshop like I'm doing here. I'm going to take that down to about 65. And now I'm going to do another stamp layer, Alt-Control-Shift-E, and we're going to go into ReStyle. ReStyle, again, is a toning and color program that if you don't know quite how to use it, seems a little scary at first. So let's go into ReStyle. Most likely you'll open up and your image will look something like this, which is not very fun looking. But don't get discouraged with this program. Even if you go directly to the preset list, there are over 1,000 presets. There's so many choices here, but when you look at the presets and you don't really know how to use the program, or you don't know some of the tricks, it just looks like really heavy-handed effects, especially for portraits. It's just a little too much. So what I do immediately with my portraits is do this, and this is a little trick from me to you. I come over to the ReStyle effect here and go to the blending mode icon. It looks like the gradient icon here on the upper right. Just click on that and you have several blending modes. I have found that screen usually works best for me when it comes to portraits. So I'm going to go into screen, and then I'm going to take my opacity maybe down to about 85%. And you can see this is already starting to look better. Now I'm going to go into something like my portrait collection. And immediately, instead of scrolling over all these individual presets, because there's so many of them, I'm just going to go into my grid view. And now you see that these are much more natural effects of toning that can be really effective for a lot of portraits. This one, there's a lot of white, so it's not as effective, but it gives you the idea that it's not all of these really, really, really heavy-handed presets. If you put it in the right blend mode and the right opacity prior to looking at the presets, and that's the key, prior to looking at the presets, you can then look at them all within this type of effect, within the screen mode at 85% opacity, and see which one is going to be best for you. So let's see, let's look at our original as we scroll down. Let's see. Oh, I kind of like that forest sunset shoot. I'm going to try to find another preset that looks like this forest sunset shoot. So I'm just going to click on the little magnifying glass, and that's going to look for presets that are similar in color to the one I just chose. Okay, I like what I'm seeing. I think I like this swamp and swirl, so I'm going to click that one. Now here's where you might get a little bit shocked again. Whenever you click a preset and it applies back to your main image and it goes back to the main image view, it is going to apply it at 100% opacity in the normal blend mode. To get back to what you were seeing within the presets, you just come over to screen, go into whatever opacity you want, and you're back to where you were. Now this is something within ReStyle that, yes, a lot of people don't know about. It is kind of a tip that you need to know after using the program for a while, but I think it's really effective for portraits. It's how I do all my toning within my portraits now, and hopefully within the next, or with the next version of ReStyle, we'll be able to make all of those settings stick instead of always reverting back to 100% normal blend mode. But I hope this gives you some great ideas. There are some other options in here, but this is the main thing that I wanted to show you within ReStyle, because this is how I use ReStyle all the time. It gives you some beautiful toning effects that make your images very unique without a lot of work. And it gives you so many different options all at once. So I'm going to apply this back to the back to Photoshop and show you what we've done. Here's the original image. Let's scroll in just a touch so you really see. Here's after clean. I'll show you that one more time. Here's before, after clean, after clarity, and after ReStyle. Again, if your tone is a little bit too much, you can reduce it, but I definitely wanted to create kind of an effect on this image, and I think we did a good job. So next up, I want to go very quickly through a full editing workflow of how I would incorporate this into my workflow before turning it over to you guys for questions. I thought I would use this image of mom and daughter because the out of camera raw image is nowhere near what this image looks like. So instead of looking at this image, let's go ahead and open up our raw image, and I'll start from there. All right, so here is the out of camera raw without any sort of adjustments applied. So it's a little bit heavy on the shadows, but we're not blowing out anything. We didn't lose any information in our highlights, and that was my main goal because the highlights over here on the baby skin were really bright. So I made sure that we still retained some information and it blocked up some of those shadows, but we're able to work with that within Camera Raw. Please know that all of these adjustments I'm about to cover very quickly, you can also work with in Lightroom, because Lightroom is your raw editor as well. So the first thing I like to work with is my temperature and tint. I usually never do what's a more preset for my white balance. Reason being is I just like to customize it. I like to create a certain temperature or look within these two sliders alone. So I'm going to go very warm because it was a really warm day that didn't quite come across on camera. Maybe go a little bit, well, I'll take this a little bit different than my one that I just showed you. We'll do something unique. Okay, so I added a little bit, I took out a little bit of magenta, added a bunch of warmth with my temperature. I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. It's still very dark and I need to open up these shadows. So I'm going to take my exposure and just push that, keeping an eye on my histogram up here, making sure that I don't start to blow out any highlights over on the right hand side, and paying attention to my shadows because I'm really going to want to open those up further. My highlights are feeling fairly high over here, especially on their faces, so I'm going to take my highlights down, maybe down to about -20. That's looking pretty good, and my shadows I really want to open up, so I'm going to go pretty far on here. And this is going to be really effective for the right side of Mom's face, or the right side of the screen, for her face to kind of open up in those shadows. You know what? I'm going to push that all the way. Well, no, I'll stay at about 95, but I really pushed that quite a bit. The whites I'm going to take down again, trying to get some more tone within those highlights, and this is doing a fairly good job. I think I'm going to take that down to about 75. Okay, and now my blacks, I will take those up just a touch to try to open up those shadows even more. Okay, so now I've made everything kind of gray and a little bit boring, but we're going to fix that within the actual Photoshop and Topaz workflow. Currently, all I'm trying to do within Camera Raw is just get it to a point that's really ready for me to start applying my own type of effect. So at this point, I would go into, maybe I might add a little bit of vibrance for the skin tone. I'm not going to add any clarity because we'll work with that within Topaz Clarity. Let's see, I don't need to do anything with my tone curve. For sharpening, I'll go ahead and just do my noise reduction and sharpening in here. If I had a higher ISO, something like 800 or above, I would immediately go into Topaz denoise to work with it. But this particular image, I think we're pretty good. So let's take that color noise down and the sharpening down and go into 100%. Take a look at areas of skin. So this is great right here. And before I add any sharpening, I'm going to jump down to my noise reduction, and while pressing my Alt key, which will allow for me to see this in Luma noise only, I'm going to take the noise reduction up. That's a little bit heavy. I'll take it back down to about 10. I'll leave the luminance detail at 50. Oopsies. Let's go back to 100. Take that luminance contrast and take it up a bit as well. I still see quite a bit of color noise, so I'm going to now add some color noise reduction. Keeping an eye on the color. 40 looks pretty good, has removed that. I'll just leave the color detail and smoothness at 50. Now I'm going to go up to my sharpening. I'm going to be paying attention when I'm sharpening to things like eyes and sharper areas, because I'm going to take it out of the skin and smoother areas. So I'm going to come up here. There we go. So paying attention to Mom's eyes. Oops, sorry. And baby's eyes. Let's add some sharpening. Take that up to about 30. And then I want to take my radius up a little bit more, get some more obvious sharpening around the eyes. Detail, I will add some detail in, but again, I'm going to be taking it out of the skin. Right now, you see that all that detail and adding in additional sharpening did not do great things for the skin, but this masking tool is awesome. If you press your Alt key down, take the masking slider up, you'll start masking out with the black color areas that you don't want affected, and the major lines within the image are going to continue to be affected. So things like the eyes and lips and larger lines will still show up as white, whereas the skin will go down. So I still get a nice amount of sharpening and detail and masking that out. Okay, now I'm going to move on to, I don't want to mess with my HSL in this particular in-camera raw because I'm going to do that within Clarity. I don't need to do any toning. I'll be doing that in ReStyle. Lens correction, I will enable my lens profile correction for the lens I was using. Maybe that was a little bit too much distortion removal, and I want to add back in a little bit of vignetting. Okay. Now I'm happy. I would usually come in and create a preset for this. And the way that you do that is come down to the preset icon on the lower right, and I'll just say outside shoot or something like that. Say okay, and now I can use this for the same shoot or the same type of lighting in the future. When you're ready to open it up, you open it up. And here we have our after raw image, which is already much better than the out of camera one, and I'm ready to begin working on it. I would do some other adjustments here. I'm not going to go over the full one, but I would like to cover at least how I would use Clean, Clarity, and ReStyle on this particular image. So let's go through that process. First up is Topaz Clean. I will just make a quick copy of my layer and do Topaz Clean. For this, I'm going to be focusing on Mom. If I was working with newborn babies or toddlers that have some sort of stuff on their skin, I would still use Topaz Clean. So it's not just for adults, but it does great things for adults as well, or you know, with the darker shadows under the eyes and wrinkles. Now, her skin is fairly smooth, so we don't have to do too much here, but I would probably start with my Skin Even preset and look at it and say, whoa, that's super strong. I'll take my strength down, see what that does. No, I want to take it back up to 2 and instead take my threshold down. Okay, I like that. There's still a little bit too much texture happening within the skin, so I'm going to take that boost down just a touch, maybe the texture down just a touch, and I'm done. I'm happy. I'm going to say okay. The reason I'm happy is because I know that I'm not going to be using this. It's just used as a base layer for me to erase some of the issues or discolorations instead of using the whole effect. So let me scroll back in, add a mask, double click on the mask and invert it. Now I'm hiding my Topaz Clean effect. I have my black mask selected, so I will come over here and use a white brush to add the effect back in where I want it. So I'm just going to control my brush size. I am at 100% opacity, but that really, again, as long as you have a soft brush, you're not going to be able to see the edges of this because it's that natural. You're not going to have to try several times too, like you might have to do if you're using something like the spot healing brush. The only time I suggest that you do not use it at 100% is on natural character lines or wrinkles that define somebody's face. You don't want to lighten those up too much, so or kind of remove those or soften them up too much. So I'm going to take this down to 50% to work on her natural lines here. Just soften them up a touch. She'll appreciate it, but you can definitely still see them. And then I'm basically done. Let me look at the baby's face and see if there's any areas. Oh, there is a little blotchiness right here on her forehead. So I'm going to take my opacity back up to 100%, get my brush going, and let's just see. Yep, we smooth that right out. Actually, I did not do exactly what I wanted to, so let me undo that, and I will instead not go full strength. Take my brush a little bit further down and just get the middle of it. There we go, that's better. And I'm going to get a couple little things in between her eyes, and that's it. I'm done with my clean work, and now I can go into Topaz Clarity. So I'm going to do a quick stamp layer, go into Topaz Clarity. Clarity, I'm going to work on two things within this particular image. First, we'll work on the skin, and then we're going to work on adding clarity to things like eyes and lips and hair and areas where you really want to have some nice texture added in. Skin is not one of those areas. So let's scroll in here. What was just added to my image was the settings that I had previously. So I'm going to just look at that before and after. And actually it doesn't work for this image. So I'm going to say reset all. I'm at 50%, which is good. I'm going to go into my clarity and just take my micro contrast down to about -0.2, and it just smooths skin right up. It's just such a great tool. I'm going to take both my low and my medium contrast down. Note that the medium contrast is the slider that is best for under eye shadows and opening up shadows within one side of the face. It does fantastic work with that. Within the high contrast, I think maybe I'll actually reduce contrast for this image. Black levels I'll leave where they are. Midtones, I really don't need to push it too high, but I'll lighten everything up just a touch. And maybe I will take my black levels down. Give a little depth to it. My white levels I'll take down just a touch as well. Okay, so here's before. Here's after. I'm not liking what it's doing to the texture of the hair or the eyes, but I love what it's doing for the skin. So at this point I would go in and do my color range again. I just wanted to show you that how I would use this in an everyday portrait edit very quickly and how quick it really can be. So let me finish this up really quickly and then I'll take some of your questions. If you have any questions, go ahead and send them in through the questions module on your GoToWebinar panel. I'll try to answer as many as I can here in just a few. Okay, I'm going to put this on her forehead, and it's really affecting the background as well. So there's two things that we can do. Let's increase the sensitivity. It's still affecting the background, which I don't want it to, so I'm going to decrease the size until it's only affecting the areas that I want it to on her face. I'm going to say OK, go back into my color range tool, and just build a very specific mask. That looks good. That looks pretty good. I'll say OK. Come back in, only focusing in on the skin. Say OK. So you can do this several times and build, like I said, a very exact mask that is not going to affect the eyes or anything like that as long as you put it on the right skin tone. There we go. Say OK. Color range. Now I'm going to come down to her chin, say super sensitive, size down, say OK. This one's a little bit different because we have a lot of tones that are very similar within the background and the foreground, so it's going to take a few more times going through this process, but once you have it down, it's a fairly simple way to quickly create a very exact mask for the skin. Okay, I have about one or two more little dots that I want to do. Open up the face little. One more. Where do we go? There we are. Okay, and now we need to take that size back down and sensitivity less. There we go. All right, I'm very happy with that mask, and now I can come in and work with my hue saturation filter if needed. Here again, I'm happy with the saturation, but if I wanted to brighten up some skin tones, I could easily do that and add in a mask again to just those areas. I'm not going to do it for this image because I'm fairly happy with this, so I'm just going to say OK. And now I've smoothed out the skin and gotten the tones and shadows exactly the way I want it. And instead of now going into ReStyle, I am going to go back into Clarity. after making a copy of my layer. And add a little punch to the image. For that, I'm going to come over to my collection of presets and just go to General. Maybe I'll do some low contrast, boost, and color pop. Let's see what we got. Okay, that's doing some fun things for the background and not so fun things for the skin. Let's take a look at just boosting the contrast. I like that, but it's not quite what I'm wanting. Let's see. That's a little bit closer. Well, no, I'm going to go back to the low contrast and color pop one. Okay, this is what I want to work with, but I don't want it to affect the skin or their faces all that much. And I also want to reduce the overall effect. So the first thing that I will do is go into my masks and grab a brush, maybe just very quickly to show you how it would work, go into my normal 100% strength brush and just brush over the face and the areas that I don't want affected. Now this is something that I would take much more time on, but since we're running out of time, that's what's happening. Now I'm going to go into the mask for my hue, saturation, and luminance and do the exact same thing. Removing the effects from the areas that I don't want them. Now it's only affecting the background, and it's still a little bit strong, especially in the color, so I'm going to take that opacity down to about 54, come back up to my dynamics and take that down just a touch as well. Here's before, here's after. That's a quick pop, and this is how I would work with it. I would do this fairly quickly and just try out some things, and now I'm going to quickly take it into ReStyle while I look at some of the questions that are coming through. All right. Let's just jump into ReStyle. I'm going to do a quick copy of my layer and filter, Topaz Labs ReStyle. First thing that I do with portrait images is go over to my top right, click on screen mode because I find it works the best for me. Take my opacity levels down just a touch and then hop into my presets. And look at how much better toning is happening here than with the other stuff. Now this is the graphic tone, so it's going to be a little bit stronger. Let's hop into our portrait collection. There we go. Oh, that's beautiful. The bull and coffee brown. I like that. You know what? I'm just going to use that and try to find some similar ones really quickly. Okay, beautiful. Oh, I like that one. City Lights 5. We're going to click on that. It's going to apply very badly and back in our normal one, but I'll go right back to screen mode and adjust the overall opacity exactly where I want it. Here's before, here's after. I'm happy, I'll press OK. Now I would do a few other things to this image to finish it up and make it exactly the way I want, but I hope that this has given you some good insight into how clean, clarity, and ReStyle can be used effectively in your portrait images, and I hope this gave you some good tips on how to use it outside of just the intended use and maybe a little bit more creatively to use on your image. If you have any questions, you can contact us at webinars@topazlabs.com. We will be having new webinars and many guest presenters coming up over the next couple of months. You can check those out once we have them up on the schedule at topazlabs.com/webinars. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and Heath will be talking to you soon. Bye-bye.